Hello. So here we are, and I'm joined right now with a beautiful woman that I've been very mutually inspired by. I think we've agreed that we we have mutual admiration for each other. And Ginevra Are, we met originally through Loyola Marymount University when you entered the program for yoga and healing sciences, but also you were also working at Loyola Marymount University. And so we share this background of the university, but we also have a great passion for not just being in a Jesuit school together, which has been open-minded and supportive of many traditions, and specifically yogic traditions. So I just want to say hello. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Terra. I'm super excited to be chatting with you about all these good things. And yeah, I remember when I joined your program, I already had a lot of connection with LMU and its values and its open-mindedness about all sort of spirituality. So it just sort of felt like I was fitting right in.
And you're a holistic counselor, which I've also appreciated knowing the journey about, because you've incorporated so much with the yoga lineages into your work as a certified wellness coach and holistic counselor. Yes?
Yes. It's still a journey because I don't really know anyone else. Like I got a degree in guidance and counseling. So it's a master degree from LMU. And all of my classmates went on to get a license in the counseling world and work as a psychotherapist. And I decided to use the counseling skills and apply them to the holistic wellness world and to the yoga world. And like, I'm very passionate about somatic practices, and I don't really know anyone else who's doing it. So sometimes I feel a little lost, but I'm also very excited to integrate all these modalities.
Absolutely.
It inspires me. So.
Well, that's a big reason why I've kind of shaped my career the way I have too, because I've always believed that having a somatic base is so important. So no matter what, with the integrative medicine principles of what I'm sharing, having it based in the somatic awareness and the full aligning of different layers of our self just seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I'm always surprised that in 2.5 years of counseling school, none of my professors taught us how to ask a client, how does that feel in your body, right? It's always in the mind. And so I needed the yoga component and your somatic wisdom to understand how to combine it all. So thank you for your teachings.
Oh, yeah. And I know that we're also both passionate about how these teachings are evolving, because there are certain principles that as they've come up, have always been questionable for me about how do I hold this, yeah? And we've had this conversation, which is why I was hoping we could share it even today, about principles like yin and yang, or Shiva and Shakti, masculine and feminine, and how to work with that in a time and in a culture where we're recognizing that not everybody has the same viewpoint of what these mean in a way that they can relate to, right? So please share your experience with that, because I think we can have a good one around this.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much to share, but I can share a little bit of myself personally. So I identify as queer and pansexual, even though I'm not non-binary. So I identify as a woman, and the sort of like the gender that was assigned to me at birth is the gender that I identify with, but I'm attracted to all sort of sexualities and different bodied people. And going into the sexuality has always been a big topic for me, and learning about the different polarities, right? Because oftentimes masculine and feminine is seen as a polarity. Right. And I grew up Catholic within a Catholic culture. And then as I approached yoga and the yogic sciences, I was hoping to find more of that fluidity that I felt within my own sexuality and within my own world. And I admit that sometimes I was struggling with it, because there seems to be still a lot of duality in the ancient traditions, and sometimes it feels a little bit less inclusive of the LGBT world, and maybe trans people or non-binary people, people who don't recognize necessarily themselves as in the body and the gender that was assigned to them at birth.
Yeah.
So I started digging a little bit more into these topics and realized that maybe just as for me, as it doesn't have to be binary for me, or do like as a dual separate thing. It can be into like masculine and feminine can be seen to a spectrum. Maybe the same can be said for many other people.
When we dive deep into the traditions, I'm thinking of East Asian traditions in particular. There's different traditions that we could be focusing on here, but in my work, even with Chinese medicine, yin and yang principles are sometimes said to represent masculine and feminine, but really that's an incomplete approach. And it's actually said that the yin and the yang came from the one, right? That the one became the two to experience the one. And I've always appreciated that perspective, that perhaps it really is one, in all of us, and we're working at how to calibrate and fine tune that in the most harmonious way within us, and in ourselves, in relationships with other people. But it is confusing when it comes to Shiva and Shakti, or yin and yang, or the words even masculine and feminine can get very confusing and disoriented, and sometimes bring up a lot of trauma and even pain as a topic. Yeah.
Yes. It's complex because I feel like both in the ancient Eastern tradition and in the Western tradition, I'm thinking about like Western psychology and Jungian archetypes and psychoanalysis. There is this way of seeing the feminine as nurturing and receiving, and the masculine as always active and stern and very focused. But I think that that's the reason I like yin and yang, because I think we all have a little bit of both. Yeah. Like the beauty between the yin and yang is that the yin is the more sort of intuitive receiving, but within the yin there is the dot of the yang. And the yang is the more structured, but there is, and please correct me because all these terms are like, I think can be interpreted also individually, right, and subjectively. But in the structure, there is a little bit of the fluidity. Mm-hmm. And in the fluidity intuition, there is a little bit of that little dot of being focused and directed toward one direction. Mm-hmm. So I think we all embody both. And absolutely, even calling it masculine and feminine, I think for many people can be limiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when it comes to terms of Shiva and Shakti in the yogic traditions, and that gets the challenge comes up again, because sometimes it's associated with being more feminine or being more masculine, as opposed to these two moving energies that work together, that could be unified and whole together in each person.
Yeah. So this year, I'm exploring a lot of this topic because I'm part of, it's an amazing online program called the Shakti School, which is a training program for becoming a certified Ayurveda wellness coach. Mm-hmm. And we started, the first month was just an exploration of what does it mean to embody the Shakti energy. And this program is only for women or women identified people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I find myself as a queer person, I sometimes struggle with it, because even when some of our teachers talk about the Shiva and the Shakti joining into sacred union, the Shiva is considered a representation of the masculine, yeah. Shakti is considered a representation of the feminine. And when they join, they create this sacred union that creates life and creates the element and creates the world. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel, but what if I am with a woman? Mm-hmm. Like, is that still considered a separate union of the feminine and the feminine? And what for those days in which I feel more masculine than feminine, but I'm still a woman, so I'm still embodying Shakti, but from my own personal perspective, I also want to embody the masculine. So it's like, I would love for these two dualities to be seen more on a spectrum. That we all have yin and yang, maybe we all have a little bit of Shiva and Shakti within us.
Absolutely. And so, when this reminds me too, when I was learning yin and yang, one way of understanding it was the yin was the shadowed side of the hill, and then the yang was the sun side, right? So that's another way that I think we've defined these terms in historically, is even shadow versus light, or sun versus moon. And perhaps if we think of it as elements, and elements that exist in nature and exist in all of us, perhaps that's a useful approach.
I like that. It makes me think, the shadow and the light makes me think about how often the womb is seen as this dark, shadowy place that then gives birth to light. It gives birth to life and to light.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful because I think we all have a creative force. And I would also encourage, sometimes as a yoga teacher, I like to maybe challenge the preconceptions a little bit when I'm teaching a class, and thinking like, oh, how can I address people in the room, not assuming necessarily whether even they're female looking, whether they have a womb or not. Like, what would it look like for them specifically to embody the shadow and to embody the light without giving it a gender, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so are you figuring out ways to express in words that are working for you?
Yes. I mean, even in the program, like even last year when I was assisting, when I was an assistant at your program, we talked about calling it the navel instead of the womb, right? Like trying to use gender neutral terms so that people can pick whatever identity is right for them without us as teachers assigning an identity. And I like to see it as a way of letting people know that both yin and yang and shadow and light and Shiva and Shakti both are accessible. And each person can embody that, and sort of each person can maybe experience that in their life in the way that is true and resonant for them. That, yeah. How is I'm curious, like, how's it like sort of expressing your own life? Because you've been into this tradition for many more years than I have.
Well, I personally have chosen to take that approach, that it's that I believe strongly it is about finding that balance inside ourselves, instead of seeking for the balance in someone else as if you're only half of something, and and they might be the other half. I don't really I don't function with that perspective, but so I encourage, at least in the teachings that we do within the program, that people consider this other view, that it's very much integrated in yourself, and that the more we could support that personal integration for other people in their unique way, and however that feels appropriate for them, and true for them, is really key. So, but it's an interesting thing, because even concepts of moon and sun being correlated with feminine or masculine or Shiva and Shakti is something that is shifted over time too. There are historians that say that so often women are associated with the moon and men are associated with the sun. But I was reminded many years ago with Kaustubh Desikachar, who's the grandson of TKV Desikachar, that or no, he's the son of TKV Desikachar and the grandson of Krishnamacharya. We had a conversation where he said, oh, if you go way back, because we were talking about the Gayatri mantra, he says, if we go way back, the sun represented the feminine. And I thought it was so interesting that historically this has shifted at times that we don't always talk about. And so it reminded me again that it's about principles of energy and how they move and dance. And perhaps it's not about man or woman, masculine, feminine. It's just about pure energies and how they move and dance. And if we can embrace that, the movement beyond stagnation into true movement and dance, the dance of life in us, then how could that not be better harmonizing?
Yes. And I know we wanted to sort of give a little nugget, an idea, a little reflection prompt for whoever is going to listen to our conversation, is try to reflect what yin and yang look like in your life in terms of rituals, and how do you embody those values, right? And maybe journal a little bit on those.
Yeah. And what are ways that you can have that be yin yang energies be part of a ritual of how you live your life, how you approach life in a way that feels balancing for you. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Terra. This has been a pleasure.
Total pleasure. See you soon. See you in Yoga and the Healing Experiences too.
Yeah.